Hey everyone, we have some interesting news today in the world of CBAM. The draft legislation for UK CBAM was published yesterday. It's currently uh, ready for technical review. We've gone through it, we've compared it to EU CBAM, which we know very well here at Dubrink. And today I'll just quickly highlight some of the things that are similar, some of the things that are different, and some of the things that we thought, wow, that's very interesting. Right off the bat, quick recap. It will start 1st of January 2027. Doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have to start paying immediately. I'll cover that in just a sec. Five sectors are in scope. We have aluminium, cement, fertilizers, hydrogen, and iron and steel. Electricity that is in scope for EU CBAM won't be in scope for UK CBAM. Currently, EU CBAM has national competent authorities as well as the European Commission responsible for uh, everything in terms of enforcement and data checking and so on, access as well. It will actually be HMRC that's going to do that in the UK. We're also targeting three greenhouse gases: CO2, N2O, and PFCs. But again, we will express those as CO2 equivalents, just like we see with EU CBAM. Now, the UK CBAM is a tax. They're also not talking about reporting periods for this matter. They're talking about accounting periods. So EU CBAM really sees it more as a reporting obligation, whereas really here, CBAM is starting to fall under accounting. We thought that was an interesting shift towards decarbonization of things. There is a concept of registration. I would say it's the most similar to authorized declarant statuses, not in terms of process, but in terms of concept. So if you are liable for CBAM, you will have to register. We knew that the threshold was £50,000 on an annual basis, but we have two ways of actually determining if you fall into that threshold, and that is depending on whether or not you look into the future, which is the forward looking test, or whether or not you look backwards. I'll just give you an example in just a sec. And the moment you have to start to register, so the moment you trigger the registration, you have 30 days to do so. That's obviously a very, very big difference from the 120 days that we see with authorized declarants in EU CBAM. Quick example of the forward-looking test. So this is really where you're looking at imports that you are expecting to come in. Let's say you do that on May 10th, 15th of May, you expect £20,000, 25th of May, £18,000, and on the 5th of June, you expect £16,000. That means that within a 30-day window, you are going to exceed that £50,000 threshold. In this case, the moment you are expecting that, which in this case will be the 10th of May when we do our review, this is when the registration is triggered. So this is when you should apply. That doesn't mean you'll have to start paying immediately. This is due to when the accounting period ends. I'll show you that in a sec. But I just want to show you also this backward-looking test. This is more if you don't import such high quantities on a regular basis. So you do 12K in January, 15 in April, 10 in July, 18 in September. Then you only have to start registering at the moment that you obviously exceed that £50,000. And that would in this case be October 1st, 2027. So keep this in mind. As far as emissions, we have again the concept of actual and default emissions. The actual methodology as to how these actual values will be determined is not yet published. What we can see is that information or technical standards from other organizations or international ones can be used. That might imply the GHG protocol. It might actually mean that EU CBAM legislation will be used at least to a degree. There's also a mention about verification. So certain information can be double checked. Now that's, again, very primitive. We don't want to rush to conclusions, but it does seem to kind of mirror EU and CBAM in this regard. Then estimates and standard numbers can be used, but they will still have to explain how that will be done. Default values, of course, different depending on where the emissions happened. You can use them for part of it, not just all. And lastly, and this was personally one of the things that I thought was very interesting, they can be set high enough so that no company benefits by choosing the default values instead of calculating their actual emissions. And this is kind of what we've been seeing in EU CBAM as well, is that the default values will just end up being a lot higher than the actual emissions. Then the next thing is about the carbon price and payments. So there's a new concept introduced that we don't have in EU CBAM, and it's called the sectoral domestic price. This is a price that is basically published each quarter by the Treasury, and it will be dependent on the CBAM sector as well as the quarter. So it obviously will vary from quarter to quarter. So it will use the quarterly ETS price of the UK ETS, but then there will be some sort of mechanism applied. The actual mechanism is in the draft legislation. I don't want to bother you with that for the moment. Just keep in mind that you will pay on a quarterly basis, and it will be done using this sectoral domestic price. They also have the concept of a carbon price relief. Basically, that's what in EU CBAM would be carbon price paid. So if you are already buying material from places where an ETS is recognized, then you can in fact subtract that from the taxes that you have to pay in the UK. Then the payment dates. So in respect of an accounting period, you must make the payments before the end of the last working day of the second month after the end of the accounting period. Simply said, in Q1, last working day of May, Q2, last working day of August, Q3, last working day of November, and Q4, last working day of February is when you eventually pay for that. Then, if you're curious, if you fall under CBAM, we've now updated check.dubring.com or dubring.com/check. You can actually enter your HS or CN codes there, and it will not just show you if the goods fall under EU CBAM, but if they're also subject to UK CBAM, given that, of course, the draft doesn't change, or the legislation that's currently in draft won't change. That being said, we hope this was of value to you. If you have any questions in regards to UK or EU CBAM for that matter, please let us know and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Take care.